Willow's plan is cold and clean, shopping for jeans, not love between. Each vow a step to reach her scheme, a family built on a distant dream. But Wraith, her sister, treasures love, sees family as a gift from above. To bring her nieces to Estolia is her ambition, the substance and theme of Gregorio's mission.
Michael Othello once asked me about the Keeper. He wanted to understand the role of religious leadership in the Estolian Hierarchy. I was unable to explain to him satisfactorily how it was that the nation could be both a monarchy and a theocracy. I could not explain how the leader of the religion had all the power and none of the power simultaneously. In the end, he was left unenlightened. It is during these types of interactions that I am the most grateful for the guidance of Deity in the lives of all Estolians, and in particular for the guidance I was given in my role as catalyst of change. Sebastiani Zakarian, Introduction to Saving the Planet.
Zorro moved with the grace inherent to the Estolian breed. Gregorio needed only to imagine his destination and intentions, and Zorro responded with obedient precision. Once more, Gregorio felt grateful, not only for the birthright of being Estolian, but for the privilege of the role he had coveted since childhood. Once Zorro stopped, he dismounted and patted him on the side of his neck before handing the reins to an approaching acolyte. As the stallion was led away, Gregorio took a deep breath and stared at the temple entrance. A summons from the keeper was unusual, especially for the stable master. Maybe it related to the upcoming transition from Melanie and Sebastian to himself as head of the royal stables. Whatever the reason, he knew he wouldn't uncover it unless he went inside and spoke with his cousin. He took a deep breath and climbed the 10 steps leading to the entrance. Smiling at the 2 acolytes as they opened the doors, he turned right and walked down the short hallway to Zeke's office door. Another acolyte was there to open it for him. The office was the same as ever. Gregorio was reminded of the year after he married Wraith, when no one was sure whether Zeke would find his Kaylee in time. That year, Gregorio spent many hours here with Theo in the keeper's office. Theo had always been confident he could step into the role if needed, without hesitation. To his left, the cracked conference table stretched toward the spiral staircase. Directly ahead sat the massive desk. To the right, the black and green marble statue of Zacharias stood sentinel, today draped with Zeke's crown and the sash of office. Gregorio drew a deep breath, the familiar sense stirring old memories. He had only returned a handful of times since Zeke married Kederin. Those 12 months were the most extraordinary of his life. Newly married to Wraith, he spent his service days absorbing everything he needed to know in case Zeke couldn't become keeper. He watched Wraith grow heavy with Benzeric and found himself forging a bond with her deeper and more astonishing than anything he had ever imagined. Now that Zeke was married and a father, with a son in the precocious stage, Antiochus Kederin, he would need a strength of character to live up to that name. Fortunately, they chose a more mainstream name when they began calling him Darren.
"How are Benzeric and Wraith?"
Zeke asked. Gregorio grinned.
"They are both doing very well. Ben's favorite toy is a model airplane. He appears to be disinterested in horses."
"Surely, in time, you will find the perfect person to pass on your knowledge of Estolians,"
Zeke said with a grin.
"Not for 30 to 35 years.
Gregorio agreed. Zeke settled one hand atop the stack of folders, his expression shifting from congenial to concerned. He tapped the papers and said,
"I have a mission for you, Gregorio."
Gregorio sensed the whisper of the spirit and understood he was about to face a challenge that would be both difficult and rewarding. He silently thanked Theo for the intense year of instruction he had received.
"Tell me how I can serve the needs of Estolia."
Zeke offered a faint smile.
"The greatest sacrifice I will ask of you is to travel to the United States while Wraith stays here in Estolia. You may be gone for as long as 10 days.
He shuddered at the thought of being separated from his wife for so long. Until now, the longest they had been apart was 2 days, when he flew to Britain to escort a stallion back to Estolia. That brief separation had been one of the hardest ordeals of his life. 10 days' separation stretched into an empty, barren wasteland.
Deity will ease the pain of separation.
Zeke reassured him.
I can guess that you do not need me to go to the States to bring home a horse.
Gregorio observed. Zeke's laughter broke the tension. His whole demeanor lightened for a moment, but then he drew a deep breath and his features settled into seriousness once more.
Correct. I am not worried about a horse. What I am concerned about is Wraith.
Gregorio sat forward, alert. When the keeper expressed concern for someone in the nation, it was seldom trivial. Zeke raised a hand to reassure him.
Nothing like that, Gregorio. You will live a long and fulfilling life, I promise. But I had an extended conversation with Wraith when I visited her shortly after Ben's Eric was born. She spoke of her niece Misty, born the day before you met her. The spirit whispered to me, telling me these details were significant.
That was several years ago.
Gregorio pointed out, waiting quietly for what Zeke might reveal.
When Melanie and Sebastian hosted that dinner party a couple of months ago, I asked Wraith about her sister. She mentioned having a new niece. I knew then that I needed to learn everything I could about Willow Griggs.
Why?
Zeke sighed and shook his head.
The spirit does not often explain.
Gregorio had the sense that Zeke was withholding something, but the promise of a long, good life lingered in his mind.
What do I need to do?
He asked.
If you could pick one thing that makes Wraith unhappy, what would it be?
Her nieces.
Gregorio replied without hesitation.
She wishes she lived closer to them, that she could shield them from the person their mother has become.
How much do you want to alleviate Wraith's unhappiness?
If I could solve the problem of Willow's kids, I would, but I don't think.
He hesitated, feeling selfish, and broke off mid-sentence. His troubled eyes met Zeke's.
You belong here in Estolia, Gregorio. We both know this. The spirit has confirmed it. If this is where you belong, it is not selfish to wish to listen to the spirit.
Gregorio exhaled slowly, realizing only then that he had been holding his breath. He took several deep breaths, feeling a strange sense of vindication from hearing Zeke's words.
But it is critical that you try to alleviate Wraith's unhappiness. Nobody should shoulder the unhappiness she bears. She deserves to be fully happy.
Zeke's voice was stern.
And that is why I will ask you to travel to the United States to serve the needs of Estolia and to bring happiness to Wraith.
Zeke's eyes searched his, seeking his reaction.
What must I do?
I do not know that I will ever ask any other Estolian for as much as I will ask of you, Gregorio. I want you to travel to the United States to attend 5 separate meetings I have already scheduled. During these meetings, you will discuss with the fathers of Willow Griggs' daughters whether they will be willing to relinquish rights to their children. In exchange, they will no longer be financially responsible. Your final meeting will be with Willow Griggs herself to determine if she will permit her 4 daughters to move to Estolia.
Gregorio had longed to bring Willow's daughters to Estolia, from the moment that Wraith shared her deep concerns with him. But it seemed unlikely he would ever find a way to bring the 4 girls to live with them.
Other than leaving Wraith for so long, what makes this in any way a sacrifice?
Zeke's eyes dropped to the stack of folders in front of him. He squared the stack, aligning each folder with careful precision. Still, he didn't look up at Gregorio.
I believe that it is a lot to ask any man to adopt 4 children at once.
Gregorio knew Zeke was holding something back. The unease twisted in his gut. Even so, the chance to ease Wraith's deepest pain outweighed his doubts.
Came the professor, clever and wise. Willow hoped genius would light Angelica's eyes, but Angelica's 13, lost in the crowd, a dreamer who drifts, not nearly as proud. Next came the model, perfection in frame, a father whose beauty serenity wouldn't claim. She's 11 now, plain as a post, but laughter and kindness are what matter most. Angelica's folder, thick with hope and schemes, intelligence measured, but not quite Willow's dreams.
In the 21st century, the amalgamation of cultures within the United States and the attendant social mores could easily be viewed as an amorphous, ever-changing entity, with a handful of focal anchor points around which the more transient beliefs and customs writhed and wriggled. Attitudes towards sexual liaisons, along with perceptions about what young Americans should do, with whom and when, were conflicting and confusing. The clash of culture and custom in light of these factors, especially where some rules bent easily and others seemed set in stone, became one of the most intriguing patterns I noticed in the young Estolian community I established in Hallows End. Gideon Zakarian. Designates Journal.
What do I need to know, Zeke? I am willing to serve this nation, my wife and the 4 daughters of Willow Griggs,
Gregorio said. Zeke opened the first folder.
I do not know how successful you will be. For this reason, it is best to keep the details to yourself. Tell Wraith that you are traveling to the United States on my behalf.
He pulled out a sheet of paper, glanced at it and handed it to Gregorio. Then he took out an identical copy for himself.
This is your itinerary. You will leave in 2 hours.
Gregorio already disliked the necessity of being away from Wraith. Yet even if he succeeded only in part, the happiness he could bring her would make the absence worthwhile. This was what he would remind himself of during the most difficult parts of the ordeal ahead.
I must admit, I felt as if my very soul was stained after researching Willow Griggs's life.
Zeke said. Gregorio shared.
Wraith told me that her sister had a philosophy about the father of her children. She wanted one child to be brilliant, one to be beautiful, one to be an athlete, and one to be a financial genius to consolidate her wealth in her old age. Consequently, she has 4 daughters by 4 fathers, a physicist, a male model, an American football star, and a wealthy entrepreneur. Wraith tells me that Willow hoped for only one daughter, her beautiful child, and planned for the others to be sons, particularly wanting an athletic boy.
He looked away from Zeke, his eyes narrowing at the thought of any woman so callously shopping for fathers for her children. Zeke grunted, his tone making clear his distaste for discussing Willow Griggs's philosophy on life.
You will begin in Minneapolis and take our newest jet. It is equipped with reclining chairs that are as good as a hotel bed. I believe I know you well enough to say that you are far more likely to accept a few nights sleeping on the jet, rather than prolong your trip by checking into hotels along the way.
He and Zeke grinned at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. There was no need to say it out loud. Of course, Gregorio would trade a few nights of discomfort for a quicker return to Wraith's side. The grins faded as Zeke settled back, his shoulders squaring in anticipation of what came next. Gregorio's fingers drummed once against the folder before stilling, his jaw setting as the mood in the room grew solemn. Zeke slid the folder across the desk, his eyes briefly meeting Gregorio's.
Your first appointment is with Thurber Barlow. The investigator indicated that he is living with his male lover. He is still a successful model. His lover does not know that the money he sends to New Jersey is child support for his daughter Serenity. He thinks it is for student loans. From everything I was able to ascertain, he will jump at the chance to sign away his rights to Serenity, especially if you can accomplish your mission without his lover learning why you are there.
Zeke's jaw tightened as he spoke, and Gregorio's expression grew somber. The fleeting camaraderie between them was gone now, replaced by a determined gravity. Both men understood the cost to the children if they failed, and the necessity of seeing the mission through, no matter how distasteful the means or the motives involved. He pushed 2 photographs towards Gregorio. The first was of a blond man in relaxed, well-cut clothes, nothing flashy, just enough polish to hint that modeling was how he kept the lights on. The second was his daughter. Serenity looked about 9 or 10, with light hair cut in an unfussy style and the sort of bright, uncertain smile reserved for strangers behind the camera. There was something gentle in her expression, an earnestness that made her immediately likable, though he doubted Willow would see it that way. Cute, yes, but not the kind of beauty that attracted flashbulbs and magazine editors. He caught himself wondering if Serenity already suspected she'd missed the mark in her mother's eyes, if Willow made it plain, or if the disappointment came out in smaller, sharper ways, thinly disguised as helpful advice. With what he knew of Willow, either possibility seemed far too likely. Zeke took the photos back, restoring them to the bulky folder before pushing it toward him.
You will have enough time to study each folder prior to each meeting. I would suggest you study only one at a time. Reading ahead can only cloud your mind and make your meetings more difficult.
Gregorio took the first folder and allowed himself a small smile, noting that the cover outlined succinctly when he should look through its contents and precisely when each appointment was scheduled. The detail reminded him of his training with Theo, his adoptive father and their former keeper, who had tutored both him and Zeke with unwavering rigor. Under Theo's guidance, Gregorio had learned that a keeper must balance authority and humility, for the role demanded a firm hand without overreaching. He recalled Theo's words,
"In the right hands, it can be an admirable quality, but it is also very easy to take it to extremes. The keeper must be a humble man, capable of taking guidance from the spirit, and in avoiding overuse of the power he is given."
Looking across at Zeke, Gregorio could not help but feel a quiet sense of pride and camaraderie. Zeke was the embodiment of everything Theo had labored to instill in them, a keeper whose strength was tempered by wisdom and restraint. Zeke opened the second folder.
When your mission in Minneapolis ends, you will fly overnight to San Diego to meet Rogelio Aguirre. Willow chose him, certain he would pass on his intelligence to her child. He is a brilliant physicist. Shortly after they married, he turned down a lucrative postdoctoral position at Stanford, choosing instead to teach at a little-known community college. When he threw away the prestigious position, with its attendant privilege and glamour, all for some altruistic desire to give back to the community, Willow was furious. The marriage was over before Angelica was even born. He remarried not long after, but he is having financial difficulties supporting his wife and their 3, soon-to-be 4 children, in addition to the hefty amount of child support he is paying Willow.
Zeke's eyes lingered on the photo of Rogelio for a moment longer, a faint hint of admiration crossing his face before he looked away, lips tightening in disapproval.
Rogelio is a good man, realistic, burdened, but honorable,
he said quietly. Then his shoulders stiffened slightly and his tone grew colder.
Willow's attitude, though,
He paused.
her expectations are distasteful. She values what he can give her in genes, not the man himself. Angelica, her oldest child, tests at the higher end with her IQ, but she is not considered brilliant. Another disappointment for Willow. Rogelio will not sign away his rights to Angelica easily or without thought, but he is a practical man, burdened by financial responsibilities. He will want reassurance that he can still contact her.
Zeke paused with a sigh and added,
Go gently with him. You need him to accept you're taking his responsibility. If he knows Angelica will be happier, he will probably consent.
The picture that Zeke pushed towards him showed him that Angelica was dark-haired and, unlike Serenity, would most likely end up being exotically beautiful.
From San Diego, you will return to Atlanta to meet with Blake Callahan. He blew out his knee in his first season playing professional football. They were not together very long, but his salary was high. He is paying almost as much as the other 2 combined. He is selfish. He will be thrilled to stop paying Willow, but he might not want to sever all ties to his daughter. His ego is such that he might fancy the idea of having a beautiful daughter. We have prepared 2 separate contracts. One is if he prefers to step entirely out of Misty's life, and the other keeps them in touch with one another.
Gregorio accepted the next folder from Zeke and glanced at the photograph inside, studying the strawberry blonde toddler. Obviously, it would be some time before her athleticism, or lack thereof, would show. But, like her oldest sister, she looked like she would be beautiful. The father was muscular and athletic, with a little bit of extra weight around his middle now that he was no longer a professional athlete. Gregorio thought he would ultimately decide that his daughter was not worth more than a yearly Christmas card. He closed the third folder, a crease forming between his eyebrows.
What?
He was not sure how to ask his question.
What is the ultimate point?
Zeke carefully adjusted the position of the folders in front of him so that they aligned with the edge of the table. Then he looked up, his eyes meeting Gregorio's, and said,
Once you have received permission and offered to take on the financial burden for each of these men, you will go to see Willow herself. You will offer her a slightly reduced amount of money monthly, and in return, take the children off her hands. Hopefully, you and Wraith will eventually adopt all four.
Gregorio sat back, fingers drumming lightly against the folder, his gaze flickering between the stack of files in front of him and Zeke. He let the silence stretch, his features betraying the persistent uncertainty that Zeke's tidy explanations hadn't managed to erase. Zeke registered this, the barest hitch in Gregorio's posture, and continued.
From Atlanta, you will travel to Newark, New Jersey for your last two meetings. First with Warren Griggs, then, at the end, with Willow herself. I expect this will be the greatest trial of your journey, which is why I saved these moments for last.
But she is still married to the father of her youngest child,
He pointed out.
They are not likely to give up the baby.
Warren Griggs is not Melody's father. If Melody was his child, there is literally nothing we could do to separate him from his daughter, short of kidnapping her. As it is, he will not fight to keep her, even if he is listed as the father on her birth certificate.
Zeke ran his fingertip lightly over the name on the cover of the fourth folder. With a deep breath, he picked it up and handed it directly to Gregorio. Gregorio flipped it open and stared at the picture of the 2-month-old baby, Melody Griggs. She was mostly bald with a few wisps of hair in a whirl on her forehead. A prickle ran across Gregorio's shoulder blades and down his spine. He visibly shivered.
What does that mean?
He asked.
That, Gregorio, is Deity telling you how critical this task is, not only for Estolia, but for the future of the entire planet. Melody,
Zeke said softly, his eyes lingering on the photo.
is important.
He looked up, meeting Gregorio's gaze. He tapped the folder twice, a light drum of fingertips that sounded oddly reassuring in the stillness between them, as if echoing both challenge and underlying trust.
The real question is, are you willing to expand your family this dramatically?
Gregorio drew in a breath, processing the weight of Zeke's words.
Wraith will be happy if the girls are with us.
He smiled slowly, as the thought of the pleasure he would be giving his wife started to sink in. Still, he forced himself to focus on practicalities.
You believe that, approached properly, the 3 known fathers will sign away their parental rights to varying degrees. What makes you think that Willow will give up her daughters?
There was a shadow in Zeke's eyes when he met Gregorio's eyes.
I believe beyond any doubt that she will prefer the child support without the children. Given the choice to reclaim her single life, she will take it, especially once Walter Griggs hands her the divorce papers.
Is there more that I need to know?
He asked. Zeke did not respond. Gregorio got to his feet and said,
I will let Wraith know that I must travel, but that I will be back swiftly.
Zeke's hand came up and he shook his head.
Wraith will meet you at the airport. You will say your goodbyes there.
Gregorio wished he had more time to be with Wraith before leaving her for up to 10 days, but Zeke knew what he was doing, and he, Gregorio, would do well to follow his lead. The timing made sense as well, since he was to fully take over running the stables within the next couple of weeks.
Serenity's folder, edges bent, barely seen, gentle smile captured, shuffled behind the screen. Her mother's gaze passing, seeking starlit glow, yet earnestness lingers, more than she'll ever know.
Newark City lights look cold. It counts the Family life in Estolia stands apart from that of the Western world. Families here spend quality time together, making it a central part of daily life rather than a luxury or afterthought. Unlike in America, parents here are not forced to work multiple jobs just to afford basic necessities. Women may work when their children are young if, and only if, that is something they wish to do. Economic pressure does not dictate their choices. Even fathers, if they wish to remain at home with young children, are accommodated. When family matters above all other things, the priorities of a nation are inevitably different. What may never be fully measured is the effect these Estolian priorities have on children as they grow, especially when compared to those raised in the much more frenetic nations, where nearly everything centers on the pursuit of wealth. Lyra Luke Domain, Enscredo.
His travels unfolded exactly as Zeke had predicted. Angelica's father would continue to correspond with her, but he was grateful for the chance to focus his resources on his wife and children. Serenity's father begged him to erase his connection with his daughter as thoroughly as possible, and Misty's father did not care one way or the other, so long as he would never have to pay another dime to support her. Gregorio was uncertain how his meeting with Warren Griggs would unfold. Since he was listed as the father on Melody's birth certificate, he needed to be consulted. He waited in the lobby of a tall Newark office building, knowing that the upcoming interview with Willow, scheduled in 2 hours, would be the most difficult. His thoughts briefly drifted to that. Then he pushed the concern aside when an elegant secretary approached him.
Gregory Zacharian?
She asked. He stood and followed her into a large office, where a man with shoulder-length blonde hair rose to greet him. By now, after meeting her other husbands, Gregorio was hardly surprised. Each man seemed more striking than the last. Willow's taste had only become more refined with every marriage.
"Come on in and have a seat,"
he said, gesturing to a plush chair in front of his desk.
"You're Willow's brother-in-law?"
Gregorio nodded.
I was not sure if you would know who I was.
"I follow world markets. Once Willow mentioned her sister married one of the directors of Zakarian International, I kept track of the company and followed your success."
The man was full of himself, suave, smooth, and sophisticated.
"So, what can I do for you, Greg?"
he asked. Gregorio recognized the tactic, a business trick some men used, shortening a name without permission to create an artificial sense of closeness or to unsettle an opponent. It could provoke either irritation or a quick, superficial rapport, both to the initiator's advantage. The only effective response was to disregard it entirely and focus on his purpose.
As I understand it,
Gregorio said.
You are unhappy with your marriage and plan to terminate it in the very near future.
He allowed himself a brief smile before adding,
I made it my business to learn everything I could prior to meeting with you.
It did not hurt to let this man see who held the advantage in this discussion. Warren's eyes narrowed for a moment, then he shrugged and affected a casual air.
"What does it matter?"
I also learned that you are not Melody's biological father, and that you plan to dispute paternity and leave the marriage without any financial obligations.
"You appear to know it all. So why are you here?"
My wife believes her nieces should not remain in Willow's custody. As such, I have been speaking with the fathers of each of the girls to find out what it would take for my wife and I to adopt them.
"Melody isn't my daughter, so I don't give a damn,"
Warren said. Zeke had been inspired in what he did. Something about Melody had moved him to suggest this trip, and to propose that Gregorio and Wraith adopt the 4 girls. He followed Zeke's itinerary, trusting there was something to be gained from this conversation with Warren.
Do you know who Melody's father is?
"I can guess."
Warren replied, shrugging.
"Why the hell are you here?"
He repeated.
What can you tell me about Willow?
Warren gave a crooked grin.
"Take some arsenic, add some cyanide and strychnine, and sprinkle a little powdered sugar on top, with a side of red-hot sex. That's Willow."
How will she respond to my intention to adopt her daughters?
He laughed.
"She'll milk you for every cent she can."
Standing up, Warren waited for Gregorio to rise.
"After you see her, if you need my help, let me know. I was looking forward to having my own child, but I've been a stepfather to the other 3 for over a year. They deserve better.
He handed Gregorio a business card.
Here's my lawyer's card. Call if you need help.
The journey to the suburban neighborhood where Willow lived took about 40 minutes. Gregorio was grateful for the limousine and driver his cousin had arranged. If necessary, he could take the 4 girls with him immediately. He mulled over the conversation with Warren Griggs. He had apparently gained an ally in his efforts to get the children relocated to Estolia. The limousine was just pulling up to the house when the car phone buzzed. He answered.
It is Zeke,
Came the familiar voice. Gregorio did some mental arithmetic. It was midnight in Estolia.
Is Wraith okay? Ben?
Zeke's reassurance was swift.
Your family is fine. I knew with the strength of my calling that something disturbing would happen in the life of Willow Griggs. Above all, I felt it was critical for you to be there during the crisis.
What crisis?
Griggs is on his way home. He will arrive at any moment. Wait until he arrives to approach the house.
Zeke hung up abruptly. Gregorio slowly replaced the phone, a quiver of unease racing through his body. What happened? The garage door slid open. A flashy red sports car pulled onto the driveway. Warren had arrived. Climbing out of the vehicle, Warren started up the driveway toward Gregorio. The polished man-in-control image from earlier in the day was gone. His long blonde hair was disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it. When he saw Gregorio, he frowned. Then recognition dawned.
Greg?
His voice broke. He cleared his throat hastily and then said,
Willow was hit by a goddamn bus!
Gregorio was aware of a lanky, dark-haired and dark-eyed girl standing at the inner door. At the sound of her gasp of dismay, Warren turned and saw her.
Hell, Angel. I didn't mean to tell you like that.
Angel. That meant this was Angelica, Willow's oldest daughter. He had never met any of Wraith's nieces, but he knew that she corresponded frequently with Wraith. She looked from Warren to Gregorio. Her eyes widened, a barrage of emotions flickering, recognition, hope, and relief.
Uncle Gregorio?
He swiftly crossed the room and pulled her into a tight embrace.
I am here, Angel.
Another voice asked.
What's going on?
A younger girl stood in the doorway, long straight brown hair and green eyes twisting her fingers in the hem of her shirt. This must be Serenity.
Mom's had an accident.
Angel said.
Uncle Gregorio is here to help us.
The brown-haired girl blushed. Looking away, she mumbled,
The girls are in the living room.
In a couple of minutes, Gregorio was sitting with a toddler on his lap. Misty, cute, with strawberry blonde hair and enormous blue eyes. Serenity sat next to him, the red-headed 2-month-old baby on her lap. Angel sat beside her, her arm around her sister's shoulders. Gregorio finally broke the silence, turning directly to Warren with a steady look.
Will you please let us know what has happened?
The 2 men looked at each other for some time, before Warren finally looked at the girls and said,
Your uncle is here to bring you to your Aunt Wraith. Your mother was jaywalking downtown. She didn't notice that a bus was heading her way.
Angel's chin lifted and she locked her eyes onto Warren's. Her voice was steady, far too mature for her age.
Is she dead?
Serenity sucked in her breath at that question, her eyes darting from her sister to Warren to Gregorio. She gripped Gregorio's hand tightly when turning her attention back to Warren.
Yes, Serenity. Angel, your mother is dead.
Warren said. The words hung in the air. Angelica's jaw set in a way that reminded Gregorio far too much of her mother. Serenity's small body pressed close to her sister, silent but not weeping. Neither girl seemed to know whether to hold on or let go, their faces a mix of confusion, strain, and something like quiet endurance. Gregorio studied them for a long moment, recognizing a resilience that should not have been necessary, and resolved, quietly, fiercely, that he would give them the steadiness and peace that had always been withheld. He took in the girls, their smallness, the haunted steadiness in Angelica's eyes, Serenity's white-knuckled grip on her sister. In this quiet, Gregorio understood that by tomorrow his family would more than double in size. He was no longer just an uncle or an outside observer to their pain. These girls would soon be his responsibility, his daughters in everything but name. The weight of that promise steadied him. He would give them what they had been denied, a chance to rest, to heal, to belong.
Night falls soft on what we keep. Names and fortunes change the game. In the silence where we weep, only family will remain. Distant voices call our names, holding fast to what remains. We must make arrangements, silent talks and soft estrangements.
I yearned to return to Estolia from the time I left. It was clear that I had made a tremendous mistake, but there was no return. I stood with the others on the deck of the ship and listened to the keeper tell us that if we left, we would never be able to return. I was certain it was the right decision, but knew soon enough that it was the worst decision of my life. The only comfort I had was the way Peritarsis said that we could not return, and also implied that our bloodline would someday see Estolia's shores again. Ophelia and Scrito.
A couple of hours later, Gregorio closed the door to Angel's room, relieved that she was finally asleep. He returned to the living room. Warren sat on the sofa, a drink held loosely in his hand, eyes shut. When Gregorio entered, Warren's eyes opened.
"Well,"
he said, his voice flat.
"I guess this makes things easier for you."
Gregorio shrugged.
I would have preferred it to end differently.
He drew a slow breath before continuing.
I have been in touch with the authorities here, as well as with those in Estolia. And I have obtained permission for Willow to be buried in Estolia, unless you have an objection. We will be leaving tomorrow. First thing in the morning, a representative from a moving firm will be here. We will speak with the girls about which of their possessions hold significance for them, and make plans for those items to be shipped to Estolia.
Warren looked at him, as if trying to gauge Gregorio's resolve or weaknesses.
"Have you come up with a plan regarding Willow's assets?"
Gregorio was grateful for the wealth that he could access when necessary.
As I understand it, Willow had few concrete assets. This house was yours before the marriage, and you were likely to lose it in the divorce.
Warren nodded.
"That was one reason I was dragging my feet on the divorce. I was trying to figure out a way to keep this house, make sure she didn't get anything that belonged to me, if I could swing it."
There is one asset belonging to Willow of which I have been informed you were previously unaware. As her husband, you now inherit all of her property. The situation is complicated by the fact that she has 4 daughters. I bring this matter to your attention because, according to my inquiries, you are generally regarded as a fair-minded man. It does not seem likely you would deny her daughters their rightful share of the inheritance. At the same time, I am aware you are not inclined to continue raising them, as none are biologically your own.
Warren was looking at him with a frown.
"What asset?"
he asked.
She owns and rents a property in New York City. The resident has expressed an interest in purchasing it. If you accept his offer, you will receive a substantial sum of money. I have asked one of our family lawyers to work on an agreement that we believe will be fair for all involved.
Warren looked ready to question him, but before he could, the musical sound of the doorbell rang out. Gregorio got to his feet and went to open the door. He smiled in relief.
"Anthony, please come in."
Escorting him back to the living room, Gregorio made the introductions with formal precision.
"Warren Griggs, husband of my late sister-in-law. This is Anthony Luke Dumaine. He is a relative of mine and an executive at Dumaine International. He has offered to work with you in making arrangements for the girls. Anthony will represent their interests.
Anthony took over, presenting the information with a clarity and conciseness that surpassed Gregorio's own careful explanations.
The property in New York is worth $11 million, more or less. After taxes, fees, etc., you can expect to net between $8 and $9 million. Had you completed the divorce you were working on, none of those assets would be yours. By rights, the entire inheritance belongs to the 4 daughters of Willow Griggs. What we would like you to consider is a disbursement of these assets that will be fair, establishing 4 trust funds, each with $1 million for each of the 4 girls. This would allocate slightly more than 50% of her assets to you.
That seems fair,
Warren said. He sounded somewhat breathless to be learning of such a sum of money available to him.
We would further ask you to promise that your assets, should you leave no other offspring, will be willed to the 4 girls. Naturally, if you marry and have your own children, you would be expected to primarily consider disposing of the funds to your natural children. In that case, 1/4 of your assets should be bequeathed to the 4 daughters of Willow Griggs, with the remainder passing to your natural children.
Warren leaned forward and looked at the documents the lawyer presented to him. After a moment, he nodded and said with more sincerity than Gregorio had previously sensed from him,
I think this is perfectly fair, perhaps even more generous for me than I would deserve, since I didn't even know about these assets.
To facilitate everything, my office will task one of our associates to work with you in finalizing the sale of the property, setting up the trust funds, and drafting your will to ensure the girls' interests are properly stipulated.
Anthony said.
I have here a simple contract that states your willingness to comply with the specified terms we have set before you.
Warren signed the contract without hesitation. Here was a man who could see the solution to 2 pressing problems, sweetened by a substantial sum of money that would increase his net worth by nearly 25%. The 4 girls, none of whom were related to him, would not be separated, and they would be raised by their one remaining relative on their mother's side of the family. He was also free to move on with his life, the disaster of his marriage behind him. Gregorio would be able to swiftly return to Wraith. He felt a rush of relief and pride, knowing he had resolved the one issue that had weighed heavily on her, the safety and happiness of the girls. Seeing her smile, free from worry, would be a reward beyond any measure. He had done something truly meaningful, and that made him feel extraordinary.
Turning us to what feels right. We must make arrangements, silent talks and soft estrangements. Gentle hands let go of what we can hold. Every goodbye has a voice, every sorrow a toll. But we're together now, no matter how far from old. We left our goodbyes in the cargo hold.
In Estolia, we do not bind the departed to earth with gold-threaded cloth or guarded tombs. We return our dead to the soil, unadorned, unembalmed, so they may become leaf, root, the hush in the fields at dawn. To offer one's body to the greening world is not an end, but a joining, a passage into the cycle that sustains all life. By giving back our bones, we feed the earth for generations, untroubled by monuments or stone. Our souls make their home in Torrizon, where no marker is needed and where eternity is written in wind and sun. Jamaya Amador inscrito.
Angel felt peculiar knowing that her mother's body was in the cargo hold of a separate airplane. Uncle Gregorio explained that they were able to get their stuff packed up and into the cargo airplane quick enough so that both airplanes would arrive in Estolia at the same time. She felt wicked. Serenity felt the same way. They both were glad that their mother was never coming home. She knew it was wrong, but she had explained to Serenity that it was okay for her to feel like that.
Sarah,
She told her sister.
we both loved Mom, but there were a lot of things she did that we didn't like. And we're both glad we never have to see Gerald again.
The man their mother was sleeping with for the last 3 years had started to make excuses to hold both of them on his lap. His wandering hands made her want to vomit. When their mother married Warren, they begged to be allowed to stay in the same bedroom because they were worried that their mother would continue to see Gerald. They did not want to have separate bedrooms in case Gerald tried to visit them. They were grateful that their mother acquiesced to their request, especially when Gerald remained a fixture in their mother's life. They hated him. Serenity wanted to tell Warren about Gerald. Her theory was that if Warren knew, then he would kick their mother out. Angel hated to point out that Warren would not keep them if that happened. They'd be stuck with their mother and Gerald. Angel's most pressing concern was still Gerald. Would he try to find them, try to claim them? She was pretty sure that he was Melody's father. Hopefully he would not be able to force them to leave Estolia. At the thought of his wandering hands and the possibility that he might be able to somehow force Gregorio to give them up, she felt sick to her stomach. Sarah was asleep. They would be landing in London to refuel, and Gregorio explained that he had to supervise the loading of some cargo that would go on the larger cargo airplane. They would be arriving in Estolia about an hour after dawn, she was told. They would have the funeral right away. With Sarah, Misty, and Melody all asleep, she got to her feet and went towards the nose of the airplane. Gregorio was reading a large book. A small light illuminated the page, and Angel saw that the script was unfamiliar. It was exotic and beautiful, flowing down the page like the picture of a waterfall of words.
"How can I help you, Angel?"
he asked her. She smiled at him, grateful that he was there when she learned about her mother. He was everything she wanted in a brother or a father. Big, solid, caring in the right ways.
I'm scared.
He opened his arms to her and she moved into them. After a few moments he pulled her onto his lap, his arms around her, holding her close. She sighed heavily, feeling safe for the first time in her life. Unlike Gerald, his hands did not stray to the parts of her he should not be touching.
"What scares you, Angel?"
he asked her. She leaned back so she could look into his eyes. He would try to say they belonged with him.
"Who is Gerald?"
Mother's boyfriend. He might try to claim us.
"Your father has agreed to allow Wraith and me to adopt you, as have Sarah, Misty, and Melody's fathers. We already have the paperwork filled out to adopt the four of you."
He sounded very definite.
But he's the father.
She broke off and looked away.
"I have spoken with all of your fathers, and Gerald is not one of them. He has no rights."
You're really going to adopt us?
She asked.
"Yes, Angelica. Wraith does not know why I went to the States. I was not sure what I would find, but one thing every man in Estolia wishes to do is give their wife their heart's desire."
He squeezed her tightly, adding,
"Your Aunt Wraith desperately wants to know that all four of you are safe, happy, and healthy. Her only regret, when she married me, was how far away she was from the four of you. She hated the thought of you being unhappy."
Will I get to call you Dad?
She asked him.
"Only if you want to, but I would like that. You will get a baby brother too, you know. Benzeric was born 18 months after Misty."
She snuggled closer to him.
I'd sure like to call you Dad.
She didn't add the fact that she had already had 6 different dads. It would be different for Misty and Melody, harder for Sarah and her.
"Wraith and I are moving into a house designed for the head of the royal stables. A job I have been training for since I met your aunt. It is a big house, but we will be pushing the limits. If Wraith has no more than 1 or 2 more babies, we will have room. But after that, we might need to ask you girls to double up some."
Angel sat up straight.
Horses?
She grinned at her uncle.
Do you think it's possible for me to have one of my own?
He laughed.
"Most Estolians have their own horse, as you will see for yourself. In truth, there are no motorcars on the island, giving our nation a unique charm of its own. I cannot promise when, but it is a certainty that you will have your own horse for transport."
Gentle hands let go of what we can't hold. Every goodbye has a voice, every sorrow a toll. But we're together now, no matter how far from home. We left our goodbyes in the cargo hold. our new rolling compasses, us guiding, and Estolians. Stable master, a role to bless us, refining partners of equestrians.
Horses are an essential part of the Estolian Way. When motor cars became more common elsewhere, difficult decisions had to be made. The hardest was turning away from the automobile entirely. If we hadn't just invested so much effort in the railroad, maybe things would have been different. Yet I know of no Estolian who regrets our dependence on horses. Melanie Zakarian, Inscrito.
The carriage wheels caught hard on a rut in the gravel, jolting Wraith. Her hand clung to the armrest, while the other strayed protectively to her flat abdomen. Yesterday, alone in the doctor's office, she'd heard the magical verdict. She was pregnant with their second child. Joy had started to bloom inside her, but with Gregorio half a world away in the United States, the moment felt achingly incomplete. He should have been there, holding her, sharing in the realization of one of her fondest dreams, to be mother to as many children as Deity would provide. Instead, his absence tugged at her happiness, pulling it thin even on such a glorious day. Ben was a delightful handful, her days colored with his laughter and small rebellions, but her longing for a larger family had been growing. And yesterday, the only magic missing from that perfect news was Gregorio himself, serving the keeper across the ocean. The scrunching of the carriage on gravel as it came to a halt, accompanied by the jingle of the horses' harnesses, brought her attention back to her destination. This was the house that she and Gregorio would occupy together. Another event in their life undertaken without her soulmate's hand in hers. She expelled a slight sigh, accepting the dictates of Deity, as the driver opened the carriage door to allow her to exit. Wraith's thoughts shifted from her own pregnancy to her sister's kids. Willow collected children with the avid specificity of a collector, searching for just the right make, model, and style, as if from some secret catalogue. She was a lousy mother to her 4 daughters. Wraith approached the house as another carriage arrived. Her father-in-law Theo joined her.
How are you doing today, Wraith?
He asked her.
Lonely,
she said.
Gregorio promised he would be as swift as possible.
She longed for her husband, to have him hold her, touch her, simply be with her. Married couples should never be asked to endure such a lengthy separation.
Gregorio anticipates arriving within an hour of dawn tomorrow,
Theo said, his voice gentle. For Wraith, the relief was immediate and overwhelming. Inundated by a tidal wave of emotions, she had to pause to compose herself. She brushed away the tears of relief and took a deep breath, smiling at her father-in-law. Gregorio would be home tomorrow. Tomorrow, he would be holding her tightly. Their souls would be renewed, and she would tell him about the new baby. A bright joy sprang up, lighting her expression as she turned to Theo, her hands pressed over her stomach.
Thank you,
she whispered, her voice trembling with surprise.
I did not expect. Tomorrow?
Theo nodded softly, never one for grand gestures, but it was enough.
But in the meantime, I wanted you to see your new home.
Theo continued.
Your most frequent visitors will be those who live and work here. The palace, the temple, and the royal stables are the 3 largest population centers in Estolia. Your husband will be, quite literally, one of the leaders here, overseeing the training, well-being, and care of our valued equine partners.
She paused on the porch, taking in the paddocks and stables spread across the plateau. Below, a narrow green valley divided the slopes, Mount Zacharias rising on the nearer side, and, on the far side, the much taller Mount Estoliana, with the cathedral at its base. For the first year after marrying Gregorio, they had lived and learned in the elder village beside the temple. Since then, their home had been within the palace. Now, with Melanie and Sebastian preparing to retire from leading the royal stables, she and Gregorio would move to the house that came with his new position, halfway down Mount Zacharias on the Zakarian Plateau. She looked forward to opening this new chapter of her life, and to the autonomy of a home she could truly call her own. He led her into the house and they were greeted by a woman that Wraith immediately recognized.
Polly!
Polly grinned, wiping her hands on her apron out of habit before gathering Wraith into a warm, heartfelt hug. When she stepped back, her eyes sparkled.
I was not sure if you realized what I did with my days.
Her husband was Gregorio's right-hand man in the stables. His uncanny ability to predict when a broodmare would go into labor and to be present for every birth made him an invaluable part of the team.
Most of the unmarried workers have rooms over the carriage house, but I work here, in the house proper, as housekeeper. Vince and I help keep everything running smoothly in the barracks at night, too.
Wraith flushed, embarrassed.
I did not realize we would have a housekeeper.
Polly gestured around the spacious hall.
This place is enormous. You would need more hours in the day just to keep it running. There is the master suite and 7 bedrooms, as well as an office, a library, and any number of additional rooms. It is far too much for any one person to manage alone.
7 bedrooms?
Wraith's eyebrows rose in surprise.
I have only been,
she said, her hand instinctively moving to her abdomen, already thinking ahead to the new life quietly growing within her.
Deity bestows on each woman the right number of children,
Polly said, repeating the familiar axiom.
Come, I will show you your room. I heard that your husband would be back by the morning. You will be glad to ease your loneliness.
After they finished exploring the house and admiring all its features, Theo guided her into the office. This room still bore the signs of the previous occupants. Papers, ledgers, and meticulous plans remained, awaiting Gregorio, who would inherit not just the house, but all the responsibilities that came with his new position as head of the royal stables. Theo led Wraith over to a set of comfortable chairs by an unlit fireplace, and sat across from her.
I did want to speak with you, Wraith, about the arrival of your husband tomorrow.
A sick wrench twisted through her.
Something has happened to Gregorio?
Her hand went instinctively to her abdomen, wondering if she would have to bring this child into the world on her own.
No!
Theo raised a hand to reassure her.
Your husband is fine. You would have felt it if something had happened to him.
He paused, giving her a moment to steady herself. Wraith stood and crossed to the window, staring out at the distant paddocks. The depth of her love for Gregorio left her raw, shaken. She would have been forced, by the child within her body, to live on. Nothing else would have kept her in this world much beyond the loss of her husband. A warm hand settled on her shoulder, pulling her from the shadowed edge of that thought. She turned to Theo and saw her own grief reflected in his eyes. He who had lost his firstborn son and his cousin and cousin's wife, all in the early years of his marriage. He too had tears, and he pulled her close. For several minutes she wept, letting out the storm of emotion her fear had brought her. Wraith was grateful that Theo simply held her and waited, giving her all the time she needed to gather herself. Finally, when her breathing slowed and she could focus again, he gently led her back to the chair she'd abandoned. Once she was seated, he continued, his voice low and careful.
Wraith, Gregorio is bringing a sad duty home with him. Tomorrow, before anything else, our first stop will be at the family graveyard. I'm so sorry to tell you this, but while he was in the United States, your sister was hit by a bus and killed instantly.
The impact of that statement crashed through Wraith's system, reverberating to her core. Panic surged. Her nieces. What would happen to them? Poor Willow.
Gregorio is bringing her home to Estolia?
Yes,
Theo said.
After consulting with the girl's fathers, it was agreed that the best choice was to have her buried here.
A part of her longed to rush to the United States, to gather her nieces and bring them to Estolia herself. But the girls had fathers who would care for them. She became aware of her clenched fists and made herself relax. After swallowing down her fear and concern, she managed a quiet,
Thank you for allowing my sister to be buried here in Estolia.
When Gregorio is here with you, you will have the chance to discuss your nieces.
Theo reassured her. She looked at Theo and felt the warmth of love for her father-in-law flow through her.
Do you sometimes wish you could give the blessings of Estolia to the whole world?
She asked him. He smiled broadly, the one expression that turned his narrow face into lines of surprising attractiveness.
I believe that the disproportionate number of boys born in Estolia is one of the ways in which Deity allows us to spread our blessings to the greatest number of people who are not born Estolian.
Your new role encompasses us, guiding, guarding, and Estolian stable master, a role to bless us, refining partners of equestrians. Longing eyes watch the valley spread, memories linger, old tears, new dreams. Love remembers the words we said, even like butterflies that flutter in my chest. A bunny's warmth around my heart at rest. The fear dissolves, I finally can see. Safe harbor found for my whole family. And Estolian funeral dignifies, traveling the road that death defies to the
With all the dire predictions about the destruction of the ecosphere, it is hard sometimes to contemplate marriage and children. What if Cousin Zeb's efforts to save the planet fail? Would we not be consigning our children to a most difficult future, shortened by the natural disasters brought on by catastrophic climate change? Even as these thoughts come to me, I feel as if a warm blanket is placed around my shoulders, giving me comfort, helping me to know that Deity is with us, now and always. I have to have faith that Deity will take care of us. Emerald Amethyst Zakarian, Apprentice Essay.
Small fingers brushed softly against Angel's cheek, bringing her out of sleep. She opened her eyes to Misty's cherubic features. The toddler grinned, giggling at her success in waking up her favorite sister. Angel sat up straight, stifling a yawn. Gregorio was already awake across the room, busy changing Melody's diaper with practiced hands.
I would have done that.
Angel said, a note of chagrin in her voice. He finished and handed Melody over to Angel.
I have been missing Benzeric, my boy, so it felt good to give it a go. I must admit, I did not realize just how different the terrain would be. Changing a girl's diaper is not quite the same as a boy.
She laughed. As she glanced around the room, Misty had settled on the floor, absorbed in a Beauty and the Beast coloring book. Serenity still slept, a gold and purple blanket tucked around her.
We will be arriving in Estolia in about 10 minutes,
he said.
I am very much looking forward to being with Wraith again.
His expression grew somber.
We will have a service for your mother right away.
Angel looked at Misty and Melody.
The little ones won't get it.
She mumbled. Her gaze found Serenity.
Serenity'll have the hardest time, I think.
Nobody will tell her what to feel or how to act. She can sit in the carriage if she would like.
Gregorio reassured her. As the jet prepared to land, he explained,
We are landing at the Amador Airport. Pequeño is the main airport, but we will bypass that. From Amador, it is about a 40-minute journey to the Royal Cemetery by carriage.
By the time they landed, Serenity was awake. Angel held Melody in her arms, and Gregorio had Misty. When the flight attendant opened the door, Angel felt the strangest sensation of homecoming as she breathed in the sweet scent of Estolia. She glanced at Serenity, who closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The two girls shared a quiet moment of understanding. They were finally safe.
Come on, girls, let us go say hello to Wraith.
Gregorio looked eager to rejoin his wife. Her mother and her different stepdads never acted like that. When Gregorio saw Wraith standing on the tarmac, his expression changed from active searching to a glow of happiness that seemed to billow out from him, encompassing Angel and her sisters in a feeling of immense joy and satisfaction and anticipation. A momentary disorientation swept over her. She felt like a whole herd of butterflies in her stomach wanted to escape and sing a lullaby in her ear, like her heart was being cuddled by a baby bunny. She stopped halfway down the stairs, and Gregorio paused to look up at her.
Are you okay, Angel?
She nodded.
We really get to stay here with you, forever?
She asked. Her voice trembled. She was afraid to hope.
Yes, Angel. The deepest desire of Wraith's heart and of my own is that we adopt the four of you. And if you want, that you might consider calling me your dad, and Wraith your mom. I went to the United States to find you four and bring you with me to Estolia. Even before we learned about your mum, that is what we wanted.
She met his eyes, seeing a sincerity in them that increased that soft feeling around her heart. Her lip trembled emotionally. She was safe. She smiled, a little wobbly, but then her attention shifted to Melody in her arms. She started back down the stairs, followed by the others. When she touched the land of Estolia, she felt as if a jolt of love washed right up her legs, blasting through her heart. Wraith was coming towards them with a couple of other people, but Angel's attention was focused entirely on her aunt. Once Serenity was safely down the stairs, Gregorio set Misty on her feet and quickly closed the distance to his wife. It was fascinating to watch the way they greeted each other, held each other. When they were done, the two turned to where the four girls were, with Misty holding Serenity's hand and Melody in Angel's arms.
We missed you, Mom.
Angel said. Wraith came up to them, gathering them close for a group hug.
I'm so glad you could come. I didn't know you were on your way. Having you four in my life is the best surprise I could ever wish for.
Serenity looked from Wraith to Gregorio and said,
You're our mom and dad now?
Yes, Serenity. We are your parents.
Wraith said. Angel watched her sister's face and felt light as a feather at the look she saw. She and Serenity and Misty and Melody were going to be safe here in Estolia. Her biggest fear in life, aside from her own safety, was the fear that she could not keep Serenity safe. Once the four girls were settled in the large open carriage, Angel watched as her mother's casket was carefully unloaded from the second airplane and placed in a dark, covered carriage pulled by a team of 4 large draft horses that would transport her mother to her final resting place. They traveled toward the cemetery in quiet reverence. As the carriages moved along the mountain's flank, away from the rising sun, Gregorio gestured toward the slope above them.
Mount Zacharias and the cathedral are on the other side of this mountain, Mount Estoliana. The cemetery lies in the foothills between it and Lake Eternity.
When they arrived, Angel noted details she'd overlooked at the airport. Her mother's carriage was pulled by 4 massive black horses with white blazes down their noses, their enormous hooves surrounded by well-groomed feathering in black and white that matched the large black feather plumes rising between their ears from each bridle. The harnesses gleamed with polished metal fittings. They were dignified, more dignified than anything Angel could remember from her mother's life.
An Estolian funeral dignifies, traveling the road that death defies, to the promised future Deity provides, as each soul is gifted with the grand design. Traveling down a strange new roads, brought here by carriages horse-drawn. Spirits rose strangely lifted, the soft cadence of the service. Through my heart and soul they drifted.
There are silent hours just before dawn when I consider Torrizon. I am haunted by the knowledge that, though we each journey toward that vast and wondrous future where time ceases to be time, the weight of our choices follows us. I watched as the promise of Zacharias unraveled within my keeping, marked by my own reticence and Apollyon's choices, due to the way I, as keeper, failed in my duty. Alexandros's devotion, keeping the promise by taking the life of his own brother, and Ulysses's courage, standing firm despite pain and loss, exposed the weakness within me. I taught the promise, but neglected the conviction the subject demanded, nearly causing the destruction of Estolia. Peritasis, Capitulo 42.
Several people awaited their arrival. One wore a crown, another colourful robes. They both seemed important, and Angel flushed at the thought of such distinguished guests attending her mother's funeral. A feeling of freedom warred with shame inside her and Serenity, now that their mother was out of their lives. Was it wrong to feel this way? She wasn't sure. The service was simple, yet quite moving. The man dressed in green, purple, and gold robes stepped forward to speak.
Deity taught us more than 2,700 years ago that many were the deities who influenced the lives of mankind. As Estolians, we believe our place on this planet and the influence of our deity requires significant sacrifice. But as a result, we are given innumerable blessings. As a people, we thank Deity for the guidance we receive. Nearly all cultures, religions, and people have always been preoccupied with three basic questions. What is our purpose in being here on this earth? Where did we come from? What is our destination after this life? As Estolians, we are not immune to this curiosity. We understand the answers to those questions differently than those who follow the many other worthy faiths across the world. We know that Deity promised to Zacharias that his progeny and posterity would enjoy great success, longevity, unrivaled love, extraordinary family relationships, and a whole host of additional blessings if we are able to live up to the simple promises he made to Deity. In response to the question of our ultimate destination and the understandable anxiety about the life after this life, Deity has given us the peace to know that we will have continuing awareness and that we will, moreover, be able to extend into eternity the loving relationships we develop on this planet. As simple people, we have found a deep level of contentment knowing there is that reassurance of continuation and the endurance of our love and family in Torreson. We have discovered that the details do not matter. We have faith in what Deity will give us. Our sorrow in losing our loved ones, like Willow Griggs here today, is deeply tempered by the knowledge that we will be reunited with them in Torreson. We ask Deity to touch the hearts, minds, and, most critically, the souls of Serenity and Angelica, Melody, and Misty, that they might be granted the gift of peace in the here and now, and the anticipation of reconciliation and understanding they might someday achieve with their birth mother in Torreson. Guide Willow upon her pathway into that future world. Smooth the transition, that peace may permeate the lives of the four beautiful daughters of Gregorio and Wraith Zakarian. In the light and sight of Deity, I speak these words.
For Angel, the words that the religious man spoke held profound weight. She felt as if for her whole life she would keep returning to those words, finding hidden meanings each time she read them anew. But the one thing she was suddenly sure of, beyond everything else, was that they were where they were supposed to be, particularly Serenity. She already looked like she was moving on from the polished wooden box that would be buried in the ground. She looked at Gregorio standing next to her and then leaned against him. For Angel, it felt as if a massive weight was lifting off her shoulders. She was not going to be the only person who was there to look after her sisters. She could count on Gregorio and Wraith. Once the service was over, Angel and Serenity were introduced to the important people who had arrived for the funeral. The man in the religious robes was introduced as Uncle Zeke.
I am really a cousin, but it is simplest to call me Uncle,
he said with a grin.
This is my older brother. You may call him Uncle Isaiah.
Angel looked at the man introduced so casually as Uncle Isaiah and observed,
But Uncle Isaiah, you look like a king or something.
The two men looked at each other and burst out laughing, as if her simple observation was the most amusing thing they'd heard all day. Finally, Isaiah shared the joke.
I am sorry, beautiful Angelica, for laughing. As it is, I am the king of Estolia, but it would be a boring job if I took myself too seriously.
After the introductions, Isaiah and his wife Lilane offered to take Misty and Melody back to the palace for a nap. Wraith and Gregorio agreed, and the couple gently lifted the younger girls into their arms before stepping away. Now, in the quiet that followed, only a much older man with a narrow face and solemn eyes remained, standing beside his wife, whose damaged face was half hidden by an eye patch, her left arm ending just below the elbow.
Angel, this is your grandfather Theo and his wife, your new grandmother Georgiana,
Gregorio said. Angel greeted them, heart fluttering at the thought that she finally had grandparents.
I want to call Wraith and Gregorio Mom and Dad,
she said quietly.
but will that be disrespectful to my mother?
No, Angelica, it is not wrong,
Georgiana said. She smiled at Gregorio before gesturing to the two headstones nearest the fresh grave for Angel's mother.
In these two graves are Gregory and Bethany Zakarian. Bethany was one of my best friends. When she died in childbirth, my husband and I raised their son.
She pointed to Gregorio.
We raised him as our own flesh and blood.
Georgiana's jaw tightened, and for a moment her gaze dropped to the grass before she turned away.
On the same day that Gregorio's parents died, we also lost our newborn son,
Theo said.
To us, it was a miracle to have the chance to bestow the love on young Gregorio that we could not bestow upon our child, who was dead. He was encouraged to call me Dad and my wife, Mom. His siblings think of him as their oldest brother, and he considers himself ours.
You do understand what we're feeling.
Angel said quietly. Gregorio nodded, his expression gentle.
I never knew my parents, but I have been incredibly blessed with the parents that Deity gave to me. They are, to all intents, my parents. They consider me their firstborn.